Story Corner, presented by Jennifer. G. Yin and Yu, Part 5. Yin was forced to set up traps in the bamboo forest for the rest of the afternoon. Metal jaws that sprang closed when triggered. Since her arms were long and slender, the old woman had insisted the girl would be better at maneuvering around the trigger. But Yin knew it was the most dangerous job. That's why Nio had her do it. Yin remembered Kura's face as she told Yin she was brave. But the longer she worked, the less brave she felt. The day turned into early evening, and soon the sky grew dusky. Yin's hopes for her brother were dashed. She was certain he wouldn't make it another night without Jin's healing. Now it was nearly dark, and there was no panda to speak of. Nio had Yin set one last trap in the dimming light. The girl's hands shook uncontrollably as she reached in the dark between the trap's strong jaws and past the metal trigger. She wondered if the trap would hurt the great panda. Yin worried what would happen to her brother if Jin was killed. Or if she were. Finished with their work for the night, the soldiers disappeared into their tents. Yin had no tent, but didn't care where she slept, so long as she was with Yu, who had been laid in the middle of the camp. Nio returned Luan to Yin before she herself retired, tossing the terrified bird at her. She also gave Yin a half-filled skin of water, barely enough for her and her brother. Yin made sure Yu drank it all, although it stung his throat to swallow. I promised you a story, didn't I?" Yin asked the boy once they were alone. It made him smile, as it always had. She wanted to remember her brother smiling. "There once was a storm," Yin said. "It wasn't anyone's fault. It just happened." Yu grinned weakly at his big sister. The sight brought tears to her eyes. "The storm came up and swept over the village. It blew shingles off the roofs of houses. It plucked flags from the flagpoles. It tore shutters off the windows." Yin watched her brother's eyes twinkle. They were so bright, it looked like the moon was full in the sky. But when Yin looked up, the sky was cloudy. Usually, when Yin told the story, she said it with all the happy voice. She described the shrill wind and echoing thunder. She made you laugh with how loudly and lively she'd tell it. It wasn't really about the story. It was how she told it to her brother that made him like it. But Yin was sad that night, and her heart was too heavy to tell it the way he wanted. Yu seemed too tired to care which version she told. He was simply happy to hear her speak. "A bucket on the porch filled with rainwater," she said, "and then the wind blew all the rain out until the bucket was dry, and then the storm filled the bucket up again. All night the porch shook and the lightning crashed." Yin glanced down. It looked like her brother was sleeping. He seemed peaceful, at least. She watched his chest, relieved every time he took a breath, until she couldn't watch any more, afraid if she continued, her brother might stop breathing. "But in the morning it was gone," Yin said. "All the wind and rain, all the shaking and the echoes and the crashing, and everything in the village was peaceful again, and everyone was okay. Everyone." Yin began to cry again. This time, though, her tears weren't those of fear. They were of acceptance. She knew her brother couldn't continue like he had. "You're so brave," Yin told her little brother. "Have I said that? I'm so very proud to be your sister." One last time Yu smiled. Then he closed his eyes again, as if to sleep. "Good night," Yin said. "I love you." She lay down on the path, looking up at the cloudy sky. The bamboos swayed high above her. Her vision blurred with each new tear. It was as if new shadows were darkening the highest leaves. But when Yin looked, it wasn't darkness she saw, but light. She saw 2 silver stars, and remembered them from the night before. They were really so bright they could shine through the clouds? Yin wasn't sure, but she stared into them. She tried so hard to be at peace with her brother dying, but she couldn't be. She wasn't ready. She thought of her parents and how they lost everything because of her. Their son and daughter and title. Their whole future. Still, a calm overtook Yin's body, as it had the night before. Suddenly, Yin felt like she understood everything around her. She could hear every soldier in his tent, sleeping or trying to sleep. She could see in the dark, even the ill-lit details of the stranger's camp. Lunan flashed unbidden into Yu's skin, just above her wrist. Yin felt a power overtake her. It was when she accessed Luan's gifts. Only she knew it wasn't it. She listened deeply into the bamboo. She heard the distant rats and closer spiders in their bamboo webs. She didn't feel sore anymore. In fact, she felt like she had slept for days. Yin whispered to her brother. "I'm going to find Jin," she told him, "and bring her back to you." Yin didn't know if she would find the panda, but she had to try. Mysteriously, she felt like she could. She snuck out of camp without waking a single soldier. Then, quickly, a plan appeared in her mind. She knew how the traps worked. What if she turned their own traps against them? Yin knew she would have to work quickly and quietly to turn every trap she set against the soldiers. But it would be worth it in the morning if the army suddenly found themselves triggering their own weapons. But could she do it? Yin felt sure that she could. She felt she could do anything right then. It was as if the night had slowed down around her. Yin approached each trap calmly. They seemed simple now, and somehow she could remember every trap site, even some she didn't help assemble. It was as if they were all written down on a map in her mind. Yin worked quickly until she had finished resetting the last of the traps. Finally, when she'd finished, Yin closed her eyes to listen. She believed if she listened hard enough, she'd hear the great Jin shuffling lazily through the dark. But instead, as she listened, the sound was all muddled together. The clarity she had found was gone. Just then, Yin heard a snap, like a stalk of bamboo cracking behind her. When she turned, she expected to see Nao in her uniform, or another soldier coming to bring her back to the camp. Instead, she saw what looked like a large shadow filling the path. She looked up at the huge creature. A panda, many times the size of any Ian had ever heard of or seen, sat down and with a crunch in front of the girl. Jin looked at Yu with curiosity. Silently, the two regarded each other, the huge panda and the little girl. Glittering at Jin's throat was a silver chain. On it, a carved figurine that shined as if it were lit from within. The panda saw the girl staring at the talisman and covered it quickly with her huge paw. There was a loud clap and a scream in the distant bamboo. The sound was followed by another. The traps were going off. "They're coming," Yin warned Jin, but the panda didn't look at all worried. "They want to hurt you," the girl said. "You have to run." But Jin just sat there. All around them, the soldiers began to appear. First, the red-headed man with the alligator, followed by the others. Finally, Naho appeared, her spider leaping off her arm towards the girl. Yin cried out, afraid. But all of a sudden, the soldiers were moving slowly, as if they were underwater. Yin looked up at Jin. The panda didn't seem fazed. One by one, the soldiers laid down against the bamboo and fell asleep. Their animals slept too, some disappearing into marks on the soldiers' skin. After a moment, only the tarantula and Nalo were left standing, creeping towards Jin on the opposite side. "I don't want to hurt you," Jin said, her voice full and lovely. "You can't," Nalo snarled. The woman fainted left, and as Jin lifted herself to follow, the tarantula leapt and snatched the carved green talisman. Yin could only watch as, in seconds, the spider scampered up the panda's neck, pulling the precious object away from Jin, chain and all. In an instant, both Nao and the tarantula were gone, running down the path into the maze, faster than Yin thought possible. Nao screeched with laughter as the spider trailed behind her. The great panda seemed conflicted. Her sad eyes followed the woman in the dark. "Why didn't you stop her?" Yin asked Jin, knowing the great beast had powers. The panda turned her attention back to Yin. "Because you need me more right now." Jin leaned her enormous head towards Yin, who screamed in surprise at the sight of the beast's toothy grin. Yin felt a wet, warm surface pass over her palms, and watched in awe as Jin pulled back, the panda's giant pink tongue receding back into her mouth. Yin looked at her palms. They weren't blistered or sore anymore. It must have been Jin's magic, she thought. The girl looked up at into Jin's eyes, big and silver on the panda's dark face. The eyes seemed familiar to Yin. Too familiar. Suddenly, the girl understood what she was looking at. "You've been following me," Yin said to Jin accusingly. "This whole time, you've been watching. That first night, that was you, wasn't it?" Jin blinked silently. The panda's huge face blocked out the early morning light so that only her silver eyes shone high above the girl. They looked like silver stars twinkling. "Who are the soldiers?" Jin finally asked. Her voice was rich and calm, like 1,000 bamboo leaves rustling in the hushed wind. "Who was that woman who took my talisman?" Yin told the Healthbringer everything she knew. They had set traps and intended to catch Jin. But, as Yin explained it, she remembered her brother, who she'd left at the soldiers' camp. "You were with me the whole time?" Yin asked Jin again. This time she was angry. "Why did you let my brother get sicker? Why did you leave him to die?" Yin pictured her brother now, alone in the camp, his body cold and still. "How could you?" Yin asked Jin. But the panda had other things on her mind. "I must contact the others," Jin said, rising slowly. "Humans are hunting our talismans." "Wait," Yin demanded, but the panda continued, as slow as a glacier in the dark morning. "I needed you to prove yourself," Jin said to the girl, and you did just that." But Yin didn't understand. What had she proven? Yin, a voice echoed in the reeds, barely more than a breeze. Yin's breath caught in her throat. She recognized that voice. Yu emerged from the shadows beyond Jen. He looked dangerously thin from his illness, but the boy could walk and talk, and he was smiling. "Oh, Yu!" Yin exclaimed, running to hold him. "Thank you, Jin. Oh, thank you." Lumen flashed out from Yin's wrist. At the sight of Yu, safe and sound, he began flying in circles around the boy. The panda didn't look back. Instead, she walked on, deeper into the great bamboo maze. "Please," Yin called after her, "let me repay you, Healthbringer. If there's any way I can be of use to you, I would like nothing more than to help you, if I can." The panda stopped as she considered the girl's offer. "There may be something you can do. I think the time will come soon when those gifts such as yours will be needed. I will take you and your brother home. After a week, I would like you to return to me, if you are willing. There is great trouble ahead. You will hear more clearly than others. Will you lend me your aid?" "Anything," Yin told the legendary animal. Without another word, Jin lowered her paw before Yin. The girl stepped on top and was lifted with her brother high onto the great panda's back. And then Jin continued on her way, carrying both of them to safety, whispering more warnings of the danger to come. Zong soon fell to a surprise attack from its neighbor, Sterile, an attack that began the First Great War against the Devourer. In the years after Felinor was finally defeated, Yu grew up to become a renowned storyteller. He spent his life recounting the exploits of the green-cloaked heroes who fought to liberate Zong from the Devourer's army. But his favorite story was always of his older sister Yin. Though the armies of Zong forbade women from fighting, she had wielded the mighty Sword of Tang countless times defending her home. She was the finest spy the Green Cloak resistance had in occupied Zong, and the bravest woman he had ever known.